Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com/Austin Eruption to save 10% and start easily making websites today. On with the show. I have a weird passion for Dragon Ball, one that astounds even me. It wasn't my first anime, that honor goes to some random VHS of G-Force that a family member had lying around. But for some reason, the goofy hijinks, deadly struggles, and constant screaming got to me. I was lucky enough to watch a ton of the original Dragon Ball when Z hadn't even aired on Toonami yet, just on some weird TV station at 6 in the morning. So of course, growing up, when Funimation and Atari would start pumping out licensed games in the mid-2000s, I would want every single one of them, and where else to start than with Budokai 1. I distinctly remember for the first time a game would be mine, the one I had saved my hard-earned allowance towards, the one I spent hours mowing the lawn and making sure my room was nice and clean for. Budokai was not good. Even at the ripe age of 12, I ran through the extremely simplistic and formulaic campaign in just a couple of hours, and then I had this sinking feeling. Baby's first buyer's remorse. Dragon Ball Z Budokai is not worth talking about. There's not much to it besides the fact that it was a lame fighting game. So instead, we're gonna explore a little deeper and talk about the other ones. So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be diving headfirst into a plethora of bad Dragon Ball games, but only a handful because I can't fit all of them. I've already talked about sagas and Ultimate Battle 22 at length, so why don't we get this shit train started with another notoriously bad Dragon Ball game, Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. I briefly touched on Final Bout in the past, but I decided that it was finally time. I've heard a lot of fuss over this one ever since it came out. I actually remember hearing that this game was the shit back in the day, but that's probably only because it was the first one we ever got. For reference, Final Bout was released in the States while Dragon Ball Z was spending some time in syndication on random WB channels. Z wouldn't hit Toonami until 1998, yet somehow we were getting a Dragon Ball GT game that claimed GT was a cult hit. I don't feel like GT was a cult hit anywhere, considering it got canceled. Booting it up is promising. We're given a pretty rad cutscene that was nothing but spoilers for all of Z if you were just getting into it. Imagine being like 7 years old and only being familiar with the show in its 6 a.m. time slot. Seeing Goku doing push-ups in his gravity spaceship only to go to a friend's house and see Kid Goku and Boo. There's surprisingly no Super Saiyans in this, but that's fine. The main menu has it. Or, if you did the cheat code to unlock all the characters, Super Saiyan 4 Goku. God, this design was awful.
You seem happy. I won't let you interfere.
Oh my god, why does Goku sound like he stepped away from a Rocket Power recording session? Like, he just hit a gnarly wave or two. Almost like CDI Link or something.
I just wonder what Ganon's up to.
Wait, that's fucking Steve Bloom. Like Cowboy Bebop Spike Steve Bloom? I think they all went uncredited too.
You're gonna give it all you got from the start, huh?
Should I clean the trash of the universe?
Hurry up and show me your real strength!
I'll destroy all the Saiyans!
Yeah, you take it!
But then it just switches to Japanese voiceover in the game.
Lumina!
Nice. It's like they all walked out or something. Oh yeah, Final Bout is fucking horrible. It's one of the ugliest PlayStation 1 games I've ever seen. Frankly, everything to do with the flow of gameplay is embarrassing, considering much better fighting games are already being sold everywhere, like your Tekkens and Street Fighter 3s. Even if you compare this to a game we covered in the Bad Anime Games 2 video, Ultimate Battle 22, Final Bout is still somehow worse. For starters, you can't save any progress on your unlocks. While digging to find out how to save the game, which was a challenge for some reason, I found this little gem on Game FAQs that's basically like, yeah, I don't know how to save, but you could just enter the code, I guess. It's fucking brilliant. While all the inputs are relatively simple to pull off, playing against the AI in this game is pretty unfair. Anytime you use a super attack, the other player gets the chance to counter it, and they'll usually always counter with their own super, making you have to mash the shit out of the triangle button. And I mean like, put the controller on the damned ground and go to town with one finger kind of mashing. Making Mario Party all hot and bothered. Awkward controls don't even begin to describe Final Bout. It's like I'm having to buffer commands 2 seconds in advance. Flying requires you to hold down a button and then a direction, which is fine, but sometimes it'll just make you jump. Then you have to press a button to turn around, which again takes up a whole bunch of time. I just can't understand how they messed up this hard. Ultimate Battle 22 sure is a shit show, but at least it was a semblance of playable in comparison. I can't believe I just said that. Worst of all, Final Bout got reprinted in 2002. Yeah, that's right, this isn't even the first print of it. Atari were being a bunch of shits and they were like, hey, why don't we just put it out again so we can get more money? And then they put that out at around the same time they put out Ultimate Battle 22, and it worked. Listen, all I'm saying is that it makes sense that Bandai merged with Namco in the 2000s because this shit sucked. Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. I can't believe once upon a time you were the envy of every 8-year-old. The game that made us become friends with that one stinky kid 3 grades higher who had a PlayStation. You know the one. Jesse. Let's evolve a little bit here, all the way from your horrible 3D models with close to no texturing to a lesser known bad Dragon Ball Z game, Raging Blast. So we mentioned Budokai before, right? Well, from Budokai we got 2 sequels and then a new series called Budokai Tenkaichi, which took the 2D fighter concept and made it more of a 3D fighter with a lock-on system. It breaks your traditional Tekken rules by allowing you to fly all over the damn place, and for the first time, a Dragon Ball Z fighting game felt like Dragon Ball. It was freaking awesome. They made 3 of these, and I'm particularly fond of the third, with its nearly 100 characters all having different forms coming in at like 168 different things you can have on the screen. It was pretty good. So when I heard the same developer, Spike, was going to be making a next gen, at the time, game, starting a whole new franchise called Raging Blast, I was into it. I spent countless hours pulling off crazy shit and messing around with the GT characters on the PlayStation 2 version of Tenkaichi 3, so needless to say, I pre-ordered it. From the same guy who convinced me to pre-order the first Assassin's Creed over Mass Effect. Fuck that guy, you owe me money. Unfortunately, despite being made by the same exact team who made the Tenkaichi games and would later go on to make my Danganronpas, Raging Blast was not a good time. It's like Spike somehow forgot how to develop video games despite there being literally nothing in between them. While Tenkaichi was never the most fluid game in the world, it sure as hell felt better than Raging Blast. In Blast, you're once again permanently locked on to whatever target you pick. However, despite this, it's really easy to lose track of your enemy. You can be in the midst of big combat, and the second someone decides to teleport away, or even if you just knock them away from you, the camera will start spinning and it's really nauseating. You have a basic set of commands that actually forced me to go through the tutorial because it was not as basic as I thought. A lot of your attacks and charge-ups require the press of 2 buttons at the same time, which is fine, but it's not nearly as intuitive as the Tenkaichi games are, and that's a pretty big knock. That's not to say it's all negative. While Blast feels stiff and awkward to control, it has a good amount of visual spectacle. Pulling off supers will rightfully blow the crap out of the mountainsides. Flying high into the air in the World Tournament Arena will showcase one hell of a draw distance. In fact, when compared to a lot of Dragon Ball fighting games, Raging Blast is pretty thorough in covering all of the major fights from the saga. I can't think of many DBZ games that let you play as Yamcha beating the crap out of Rikum on King Kai's planet, or him versus Dr. Gero, so there's always that. Stupid Yamcha. Can't do it. Yamcha was cool as fuck, dude. Can't do it. A lot of my disdain for Raging Blast comes from just the way it feels and the potential it had. Assigning supers to a simple flick of the right stick was a smart idea, but the fact that you have to basically be standing still in order to use it eliminates any sense of fluidity. Not to mention, it's really easy to dodge these. They even continued the tradition of having weird-ass what-if stories like Vegito and Gogeta arguing about who is the better fusion. I love that shit. It reminds me of some fanfic I probably read and or wrote. But in the end, compared to their previous game, it just lacks the charm, intuitiveness, and, well, fun. Now there was a sequel, one that I never picked up because Raging Blast was too much of a jank-ass disappointment to me. Spike would also develop the mixed-reviewed Ultimate Tenkaichi, but in the interest of not just covering the same thing over and over, let's move on. So how about we ditch your traditional 1 versus 1 fighting game format and move on to something a little different. Back in 2014, the Dragon Ball series would get what is basically their own version of the Gundam Versus franchise in a game called Dragon Ball Z Battle of Z. Have you ever heard of the Japanese game developer Art Dink? Yeah, you heard me, Art Dink. Me either. Well, apparently like 95% of their games never came out over here in the States. Usually I'd be like, it's probably because they suck, but they were responsible for a couple little gems some of you guys might know. No One Can Stop Mr. Domino, Fossil Fighters Champions, Carnage Heart, Xenoverse Sword Art Online, but I was also surprised to find out that they've made a little game called Dragon Ball Z Battle of Z. This was based on a relatively popular arcade game in Japan called Dragon Ball Zenkai Battle, which would become Battle Royale in 2015. Yo, shit, this was like 3 years before the Battle Royale craze. What the fuck? Similarly to Mobile Suit Gundam Extreme Versus, these arcade cabinets sit 2v2 and would gain a good amount of traffic in Japanese game centers. Honestly, when I heard about these games, I got hella jealous because, well, I was stuck in the middle of Dustville, Texas. However, prior to the Gundam games finally getting a proper release here in 2017 with Gundam Versus, Battle of Z would be ported and slapped onto Western store shelves in the middle of 2014. Now, I remember being crazy hyped for this one. The precursor to Dragon Ball Super, Battle of Gods, had just been released nearly a year before, and it reinvigorated my interest in the series, which had been sleeping for a little bit. Yeah, there were games coming out, but with nothing substantially new except for that awful MMO Dragon Ball Online, I saw that red-haired Super Saiyan God, and I got pumped. Also, Beerus is like my favorite. So, I mean, how could I not be hyped for this? But then you play it, and like... Now, I've played a lot of 3D arena fighters. You've got your Gundam Versus, of course, your Dissidias, hell, even the newest Dissidia. Each one of them has their ups and downs, but none of those games will just freeze me in place when I run out of energy. Battle of Z doesn't even notify you when you're taking a breather. You'll just stop moving, and if you turn the camera, maybe your mouth is slightly open. Oof. There's a weird dissonance between the levels of care for the source material. Since Battle of Z is a 4-on-4 fighting game, a lot of the time you'll be assembling your own crew for battles. Since we're going through the entire saga of Dragon Ball Z, obviously you won't be able to take Yamcha with you to Namek, but you can have 4 Gokus fight Recoome. Y'all remember when Tien beat Great Ape Vegeta with Goku, Gohan, and Yamcha? Yeah, it's weird. Despite some care put into the characters and their movesets, this game ends up being a sponge fest, because all of your enemies have so much fucking HP, like, you're a total piece of paper in comparison. Now, you can level up individual Z fighters and even slot them with power-ups you'll unlock from playing the game and purchasing them at random. But applying the concept of leveling and min-maxing to anything resembling a fighting game is just boring. It would be one thing if it were just a single mode you could do, but that's the entire game. Hell, even the online is using custom characters, if you can get a match. I sat in a lobby with a dude for a solid 5 minutes. I wonder if he's still there. I loved him. I mean, all in all, Battle of Z just feels like a really poorly made Gundam Versus, one totally confused or just not caring at all with the source material. I expected better from Art Dink, considering they worked on one of my favorite games of all time, Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together. No, seriously, go play that instead of anything in this video. Go right now. Bye-bye. Consider the next part of this video a bit of a sequel. Earlier this year, I released a video covering the Legacy of Goku trilogy, and it was a pretty alright video. I talked about how the first game was not good at all, and how it got better with each release. However, the developer Webfoot Technologies was not done there. Oh god, they were not done there. I need you guys to get ready, because they made 2 more games, and they're worse. Webfoot wasn't the only non-Japanese studio working on DBZ games. You also had Avalanche Studios, who made Sagas, which... There was also a video game for that one trading card game which came out in the 2000s. Anyone remember these? I had so many Dragon Ball Z cards growing up, but this Game Boy Advanced adaptation of it sure was. It had like one song playing the entire time, and oh god, it's just nothing. I literally don't know what to say about this one, but here's like 5 seconds of raw gameplay. Someone out there is just hyping up a storm right now about how DBZ CCG changed their life and how they're gonna come kick my ass, but that's okay, because we're not talking about that. Let's move back to Webfoot Technologies. Shortly after Legacy of Goku 2 released, they had another surprise ready for the world. Webfoot had clearly mastered the Zelda clone genre, so now it was their time to tackle fighting games. The Game Boy Advance had a few pretty decent fighters. While a lot of them were ports, it was always fun to take those on the go with you, and Dragon Ball was a shoo-in. However, as we've already seen many times in this video, fighting games and Dragon Ball have not been good friends. It's of my opinion that Dragon Ball Z wouldn't get a really solid fighting game until Fighter Z earlier this year, but I don't think anyone was ready for Taiketsu. Allow me to preface this. Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu sold over 600,000 copies in the United States alone. Taiketsu sold 600,000 copies at least. Now, I've played a lot of fighting games throughout my life, with Taiketsu being the most recent of them, but never have I been so confused with how poorly a game was reading my combo inputs. I was convinced every walkthrough I found was just lying to me, like, let's just troll everybody and have all of our combo lists be wrong. Won't that be funny? But no, they're just that hard to pull off. Imagine inputting quarter circles and half circles with that stubby Game Boy Advance D-pad. It probably doesn't feel good to think about. Now, imagine that no matter what you input, it's probably not gonna take it. That's Taiketsu. The best strategy I found was to just kick people in the knee with Goku over and over. I haven't even touched upon the sprites yet, which was probably the first thing you noticed, but do I really have to? Just look at them. It's like someone was a fan of Donkey Kong Country, had some really low resolution library printed out pictures of the cast, MS Paint, and 3 hours to get everything done for shipping. Like, what the heck, y'all? I made fun of Goku's thick ass buff neck in the Legacy video, but damn. It's very rare that we get a game that has not only zero personality and charm, but zero playability. That's a combo of fucking destruction. Also, it doesn't even have new menu music. They just reused it. It's pretty funny when one of Taiketsu's first unlocks is the ability to make the time countdown extremely fast, so you barely have to play the game to unlock things. Low-effort games made for a quick buck aren't an uncommon thing, but Taiketsu is definitely a new low. But guess what? They were not done yet. Shortly after Boo's Fury released on the Game Boy Advance in 2004, Webfoot had another new task. Z was old news in the West. GT was finally up in our faces. I remember fondly looking up stuff on random GeoCities websites back in the day, digging deep on what GT was exactly. That Japanese opening song, Dan Dan Kokoro Hikaruteku, was my shit. Toss that shit right onto the MP3 player with a bunch of DDR songs. Y'all remember Dragon Ball AF? Super Saiyan 6 Goku? Hell yeah, those were the days. If there was a new metal band, you bet your ass they had a Dragon Ball AMV with some weird MS Paint OC Super Saiyan forms attached to it. When GT was officially announced for the States, I got excited right up until I heard this.
Step into the Grand Tour. Step into the Grand Tour. Dragon Ball GT.
Oh my fucking god. Whenever I want to clear a room, I usually toss this song on, and it works 99% of the time. It has this weird harmonic dissonance, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for the Webfoot Technologies made Dragon Ball GT Transformation. Now that they'd conquered fighting games, it was on to the next logical step, beat 'em ups. This really was a game after my own heart. As a big Dragon Ball fan, as a big Streets of Rage and general beat 'em up fan, if you told me a combo of those was coming out, I would turn into a moist towelette, like a sticky one. But my feelings upon playing it were similar to that of the ones that I felt after the GT English opening. I don't know what Webfoot's problem is, but they can't seem to design decent looking sprites for any of these games. Transformation is really unpleasant to look at, especially in motion. So here's the issue. You would think it's difficult to mess up a beat 'em up, yeah? That's what I've always thought. However, that turns out not to be the case. For starters, single-player variants of these are never, like, amazing or anything, but with enough enemy variety and interesting level design, you can pull through. Transformation, on the other hand, has none of that. I'd say we've got like 5 types of enemies tops. Every single level is a straight line. Like, people hating on Final Fantasy 13 need to shut up because this is an actual straight line. You can move up and down, but I guess they didn't know how to design a level with a little slanty thing because it's just go left and right. Oh god, these levels go on forever too. When after 8 minutes I was still in the first stage, slowly moving forward through extremely spongy enemies, I knew I was in for a bad time. Now each character has a few basic attacks, as well as a key meter they can charge to unleash their big super abilities. This is pretty much the only thing you're going to want to work towards, considering just how much damage it causes, especially to big enemies. There doesn't seem to be a good way to deal with hostile patterns, so I just found myself jumping and then mashing the attack button while coming down at a diagonal. This way I didn't have to knock them out, rendering them unable to hit for a few seconds, and instead I could just spam this to work them down real quickly. 9 out of 10 times after an enemy gets up, it'll be able to hit you first, so I'll just do this. In the story mode, you get Trunks, Pan, and newly Kid Goku as you go from their first space adventures all the way to the end of the Baby Saga, with the really awful looking and sounding Super Saiyan 4 Goku. Oh, also the Golden Monkey Baby being like 2 sprites and individually moving hands. It's so ugly. Then when you beat him, you also finish the game, showing us a quick cutscene and then the credits. Now, Transformation has a lot of unlocks. After you beat the story mode, you get the single player, which is a weird thing to read out loud. In single player, you aren't restricted to the 3 normal characters, but instead can use others like Piccolo and Oob. No Majub for some reason, but that's okay. Then you just go through the exact same levels again, except with no dialogue. You gain Zenny by playing through levels, and you'll spend that Zenny in order to unlock characters and game modes. Though beating the entire game didn't give me enough to nab literally anything, so I guess I'm just done with this. I used a Game Shark to mess around and try to unlock stuff, but even turning on a one-hit kill mode had transformation just as tedious and boring. It's hard to turn me around from a beat 'em up, but congrats Webfoot, you did it. Transformation would be the last game that Webfoot Technologies would work on with the Dragon Ball license, and I completely understand that. When you have trash like Taiketsu and Transformation, which are both loudly lauded as horrible fucking games, I also wouldn't give you the license to my IP. But they wanted to keep this going real bad. The ending to the game is straight up like the end with a question mark, like they needed it. If you make a beat 'em up grindy, it's bound to lose some charm. Even with the infinitely charming Dragon Ball, they failed on all fronts. When you look at Webfoot's track record with games, it goes Legacy, Legacy 2, Taiketsu, Boost Fury, and then Transformation. That kind of inconsistency is extremely baffling to me, but if they were truly thrown into the position of a money-making assembly line, I can understand. But at the very least, get your damn sprites looking decent! And so ends the saga of Webfoot Technologies. Now, they wouldn't go away as a company, and they would still be around for a while. I think they're still around today, and they're making something, I guess. But we aren't done yet, y'all. We have one more game to cover, and I probably saved the worst of them for last. If you know where I'm going with this, then you know. We're about to talk about Dragon Ball Z Kinect. God help us. My arms hurt. That's the first thing I wrote down after playing Dragon Ball Kinect for 2 hours. After a long nap. But not in like the good, just played VR, and that was fun hurt kind of way, but the I fully regret everything manner. The Kinect sucked. I will always prefer any kind of button-based inputs with gaming, and nothing can ever change that. Anytime I would see one of those "you are the controller" adverts, I would slowly lose my mind. Seeing Microsoft aim for that casual market that Nintendo had last gen showed us how little they were concerned with keeping their hardcore fans pleased. They even tried that shit with the X-Bone and, well, that failed. Really hard. Yo. I could go in on the Kinect, and I will, but that's for another date. Look out for the Kinectrospective when I destroy my body and sanity for your entertainment. For now, we need to go back to Raging Blast. The developer of that, Spike, got another chance with this one. They were decent at the spectacle, so sure, why not give them a motion-based game where they don't even need to hit the buttons? As long as they make it look good, it'll work, yeah? It's not their fault. It really isn't. I can't be mad at Spike here because I know they tried their best. The Xbox 360 Kinect is just one of the worst pieces of gaming hardware to exist, but I do have to talk about it with that in mind because after all, it is part of what this game is. For starters, after calibrating the Xbox, which involved me using my cell phone in order to do the thing because I didn't have a card, I couldn't figure out how to move past the main menu. It just says, raise your arm towards the screen to start, and as you can actually see, I am trying my best. What it actually meant was, raise your dongers to the sky like you're summoning one of those Genki Damas, and then you can start the game. Bunch of bullshit. I did start bobbing my head to the menu theme, which is pretty sick. The motion detection for Dragon Ball Z Kinect is really random. I'll be in a fight with someone and it'll ask me to punch a bunch and I'll move slightly and it'll pick up a ton of them. Other times it'll ask for the exact same thing and despite me flailing around violently, it's barely moving. There's something about flailing and flopping your arms violently all over the place and a lack of response that causes you to get angrier and then flail your fucking arms even more violently. If you look at any part of the game footage, in the little top right corner there, you can see and sense pretty much any emotion that I'm feeling at any time. Can you guess what this one is? Yeah, that's right. It's me losing interest and just dancing. So basically, you're going through the story of Dragon Ball Z, albeit extremely abridged, making Team 4-Star look slow as hell. It cuts from Goku about to get destroyed by Ape Vegeta immediately to the Captain Ginyu fight, which is like, huh? No dialogue or story explanation, just like zip zap zoobidabop, fuck 3 volumes of manga. There was this point where I was fighting against Frieza as Vegeta, and the only way I could beat him was by performing a super attack which had not been a thing in any battle before. Doing Goku's Kamehameha is relatively easy, but Vegeta's thing just wouldn't fucking work for me. I tried so many times, and I could pull off the first maneuver, but I could not, for the life of me, get the second one to work. I think you can literally see my frustration. I somehow managed to pull it off by doing something entirely different than what the example picture displayed, but whatever. Overall, Kinect Dragon Ball Z sucks. It runs at a horrible frame rate sometimes. Try pulling off a Kaioken even once, I freaking dare you. I played Dance Central, and it didn't feel like half the workout that Dragon Ball Z Kinect gave me. Turns out just violently punching the air is the ultimate way to get gains in your arms. Unfortunately, you won't feel good about them at all. In the 5 years I've run a YouTube channel, never once have I been so angry at a video game, so filled with hatred that I needed to take a nap. A nap, guys. I'm in my 20s and a video game made me take a fucking nap. And I think that's all I can really say. Well, that's all that I have here for today. I think talking about all of that again made me angry again, so I'm probably gonna go to sleep and wake up sometime in 2019. We already had Christmas, but for everyone else, have a happy new year, have a cozy holiday. Why don't you go bundle up and play something good, like Super Mario World or God Hand, which is just as good as Final Bout. But before we wrap things up, let's talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. You know, when I'm not playing some of the worst games that humanity's created, I'm doing my best to look professional and clean. Besides taking a shower, I use Squarespace to freshen up my online life. Because look, a lot of people are in need of websites, myself included. Artists, YouTubers, chefs, photographers, whatever you are, Squarespace is extremely easy to use and will have you online pretty darn quick. Big ups to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. If you've been wanting to have an online hub or website for all of your content, no matter what you are, it's really easy to just go with Squarespace. It's really easy to use. In fact, the official Austin Eruption website is almost near completion, so you guys will have that in your direction very soon. That's right. We compiled a bunch of chameleon facts. How many? Well, not all of them, because that would be a lot of facts, but a lot of them. A whole bunch. So hey, if you're itching to get started on creating your own website and want to use the best, check out squarespace.com/Austin Eruption or click the link in the description to sign up. Create to your heart's content. That's squarespace.com/Austin Eruption to go get started today. Thanks for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Alfredo Ariano, Brandon Harden, Chase Scott, Christopher Olivia, Cliff Bro, Donald Dowdy, Flaming Fighter, Jay Roos, Jackets, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Calvin Wong, Legend Gary, Matthew Elliott, Plasma Phoenix, Rashawn Wilcox, Ronnie Vile, Shintaro, and Superfly1787. Thank you all so much for your generous donations. That's the last video for the year, so I'll see you guys in January at MagFest and on the internet.